There's a paradox at the heart of modern life. We're more connected than ever before, yet we feel increasingly disconnected from ourselves. We fill every moment with noise, podcasts during our commute, music while we work, television as we eat, social media before we sleep. We've become terrified of silence. But what if I told you that the very thing we're avoiding might be exactly what we need? That silence isn't an absence to be filled, but a presence to be experienced. That in the quiet spaces we fear, there exists a profound healing power. Today, we're exploring how silence can heal you, drawing from ancient wisdom traditions, modern neuroscience, and the lived experiences of those who've discovered what happens when we finally stop running from the quiet. Let's start with a simple question. When was the last time you sat in complete silence? Not the silence of waiting for something to load on your phone, but genuine, intentional silence. No devices, no distractions, just you and the quiet. For most of us, it's been a long time. And when we do encounter silence, something uncomfortable happens. Thoughts we've been outrunning suddenly catch up with us. Emotions we've been drowning out with constant stimulation rise to the surface. That nagging sense that something isn't quite right becomes impossible to ignore. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger wrote about what he called das Gerede, the idle talk, the constant chatter that prevents us from confronting the deeper questions of existence. We live, he suggested, in a state of distraction, where noise serves as an escape from authentic being. But here's what's fascinating. The noise we use to escape isn't just external. We carry an internal soundtrack, a constant stream of mental chatter that psychologists call the default mode network. It's that voice that narrates your life, judges your experiences, rehearses conversations, relives embarrassments, and plans for futures that may never arrive. This internal noise is exhausting. Studies show that our minds wander nearly half of our waking hours, and when they do, we're significantly less happy than when we're present. We're literally thinking ourselves into suffering. Silence, then, isn't just about turning off external noise. It's about finding a way to quiet the cacophony within. Now, you might think silence is simply the absence of stimulation, a kind of sensory deprivation, but neuroscience tells us something remarkable. Silence is actually therapeutic at a biological level. In a 2013 study published in the journal Brain, Structure and Function, researchers discovered that 2 hours of silence per day prompted cell development in the hippocampus, the region of the brain related to memory formation and emotion processing. The silence literally grew new brain cells. Research has shown that silence reduces stress hormones like cortisol, lowers blood pressure, and improves immune function. When we're constantly bombarded by noise, our nervous system remains in a state of low-level alert. We're always slightly on edge, always ready to respond to the next stimulus. Over time, this becomes our baseline, and we forget what it feels like to truly relax. Silence allows our nervous system to reset. It activates what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest mode. Heart rate slows, breathing deepens, the body begins to repair itself. But perhaps most intriguingly, silence changes how our brain processes information. When we're not focused on external tasks or internal narratives, our brain enters what neuroscientists call the default mode. This is when different regions of the brain start communicating in novel ways. It's in these quiet moments that we often experience our deepest insights, our most creative breakthroughs, our most profound realizations about ourselves and our lives. The Swiss physician and philosopher Paracelsus wrote in the 16th century that nature is the best physician. Perhaps silence is nature's way of healing the mind. Of course, the healing power of silence isn't a new discovery. Spiritual traditions across cultures and centuries have understood this deeply. In Buddhism, there's a practice called noble silence, where practitioners refrain from speaking for extended periods, sometimes days or weeks. The Buddha himself achieved enlightenment only after sitting in silent meditation under the Bodhi tree. The silence wasn't preparation for the insight, it was the condition that made insight possible. Christian mystics spoke of apophatic theology, the idea that we can only approach the divine through silence, through what cannot be said, rather than what can. The 14th century text, The Cloud of Unknowing, teaches that God exists beyond words and concepts, accessible only through a wordless contemplation. In Quaker tradition, worship consists largely of sitting together in communal silence, waiting for the inner light to speak. Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk and writer, describes silence as the presence of everything simultaneously, not an absence, but an abundance. What these traditions understood is that silence creates space for something beyond the ego, beyond our constructed sense of self, to emerge. When we're constantly talking, thinking, analyzing, and judging, we're operating from a limited perspective. We're trapped in our own mental loops, our own narratives about who we are and what the world is. Silence breaks these patterns. It allows us to hear what the Japanese call ma, the fertile void, the pregnant pause, where all possibilities exist. In that space, healing happens not because we're doing something, but because we're finally allowing something to be done to us. The Taoist sage Lao Tzu wrote, "Silence is a source of great strength, not the strength of force, but the strength of receptivity, of allowing, of trust." Let's get practical for a moment. How exactly does silence facilitate emotional healing? First, silence creates space for feeling. We live in a culture that's uncomfortable with difficult emotions. When we're sad, we're told to cheer up. When we're angry, we're told to calm down. When we're anxious, we're offered distractions or quick fixes. We've learned to suppress, to bypass, to move on before we've actually moved through. But emotions aren't problems to be solved. They're information to be integrated. Grief needs to be grieved. Anger needs to be acknowledged. Fear needs to be felt. And these processes require silence and stillness. Psychologist Carl Jung spoke about the necessity of confronting what he called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've rejected or denied. This confrontation can't happen amid noise and distraction. It requires us to sit with what's uncomfortable, to allow what's been hidden to surface. In silence, we stop performing for others and for ourselves. The masks we wear, the roles we play, the carefully curated versions of ourselves we present to the world all begin to fall away. What remains is something more authentic and often more vulnerable. This vulnerability is where healing begins. When we stop defending, explaining, and justifying, we can finally feel what we've been avoiding. And paradoxically, when we stop resisting our pain, it begins to transform. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke advised a young poet to live the questions, to sit with uncertainty rather than rushing toward answers. Silence teaches us this patience. It shows us that not everything needs to be fixed immediately, that some healing happens in its own time, that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is nothing at all. There's a concept in Japanese aesthetics called yugen, a profound awareness of the universe that triggers feelings too deep for words. Silence opens us to this depth, this dimension of experience that exists beyond language and logic. So how do we actually practice silence in a world that seems designed to prevent it? Start small. You don't need to book a silent retreat or spend hours in meditation, though those can be powerful experiences. Begin with 5 minutes a day of intentional silence. Sit somewhere comfortable. Close your eyes if you'd like. Don't try to empty your mind or achieve some special state. Simply be present with whatever arises. At first, it will be uncomfortable. Your mind will race. You'll feel restless, maybe even anxious. This is normal. You're not doing it wrong. You're just noticing how much noise you usually carry. Stay with it. Observe the discomfort without judgment. Notice how thoughts arise and pass away like clouds in the sky. Create silent spaces in your daily life. Drink your morning coffee without checking your phone. Take a walk without headphones. drive without the radio, cook a meal in quiet contemplation. These small practices accumulate, creating islands of stillness in the sea of noise. Consider a digital Sabbath, a day each week when you disconnect from all electronic media. The world won't end if you're unreachable for 24 hours, but your relationship with yourself might fundamentally shift. If you're ready for something deeper, explore contemplative practices like meditation, mindfulness, or centering prayer. These aren't religious obligations. They're technologies of consciousness, methods refined over centuries for accessing silence more deeply. The key is consistency. 5 minutes every day is more powerful than an hour once a month. Silence, like any practice, requires commitment and patience. In his essay Walking, Henry David Thoreau wrote, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life." Silence is a way of living deliberately in a world that encourages us to live automatically. The healing that silence offers isn't flashy or immediate. It doesn't promise to fix all your problems or transform you overnight, but it does something more profound. It reconnects you with yourself, with the part of you that exists beneath all the noise, beneath all the doing and striving and performing. In that reconnection, we find not just healing, but wholeness. We discover that we were never as fragmented as we thought, that beneath the chaos, there's always been a still point, a center that remains undisturbed. The mystic Meister Eckhart wrote, "Nothing in all creation is so like God as silence." Whether or not you're religious, the wisdom remains. In silence, we touch something timeless, something essential, something that's been waiting patiently for us to finally stop running and come home. The question isn't whether silence can heal you. The question is, are you willing to be silent enough to find out? Thank you for watching. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences with silence in the comments. And until next time, may you find moments of quiet in your days, and in those moments, may you find yourself